more clear sounding mics for this week's episode.
Yeah, if you're tuning in, you probably heard our voices echoing over themselves, and that was those lapel mics' at fault. So we adapt, we grow, we learn together as a team.
We're just firing on all cylinders. I think there's nothing standing in the way of us delivering the best from this week in Bitcoin to the masses now. I think we're ready to go, right?
Well, I mean, so why don't let's just do it. Let's just go.
Let's do it. But as much as I enjoy recapping just this week's hot take on news, Bitcoin is a ever evolving, deeply ingrained technology. As much as a week's worth of news affects it, I think there's also things about Bitcoin that last forever that are always worth talking about. And that was kind of our mission over at BitcoinMagazine.com, the mothership as we call it on this show. This week, we celebrated some of the pioneers of Bitcoin. So a handful of them were in the news this week, so they are newsy in that sense. But these are individuals who just have kind of like blazed the trail for Bitcoin over many months and years. So specifically news-wise, yesterday was Ross Ulbricht's, sadly, I think the start of his 8th year in prison. He's in prison for his alleged role behind darknet marketplace, the Silk Road, which is really Bitcoin's first major use case. Late August marked, I think, the 6th anniversary of Hal Finney's death. He was super instrumental in kind of paving the technical path for Bitcoin. First transaction ever with Satoshi, huge Bitcoin supporter. So at Bitcoin Magazine, we're working to raise money for the ALS Foundation in his name right now. So check out the mothership for more info on that. The other two kind of newsy pioneers we've been talking about are Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, who are not directly tied to Bitcoin, but huge privacy advocates in our age, and that's connected to Bitcoin. So that's a long way of me setting up this question. Brandon, of those 4 pioneers I mentioned, I'm going to put you on the spot. Who's your personal biggest hero out of those 4?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, personally, I would say we had Ed Snowden at Bitcoin 2019. He did say at the conference that he used Bitcoin to purchase the servers on which he had all the information that he handed over to the journalists about the U.S. spying on everybody. So I'd say that's directly Bitcoin related. And I'd say he's probably, he'd be my favorite of the 4. But they're all great. I mean, they're all incredible people who've, really changed the world through their actions, and I think for a better, made it a better place. I would say, one thing to add is that Bitcoin Magazine /r-hero-how, we have a lot of information about what we're doing with this ALS fundraiser. Is today one of the last days to participate?
I think so, yeah. So this is your last chance to get in on helping us fundraise for ALS and be in the pool for some pretty sweet prizes that we're handing out.
Yeah, I think we're handing out a prize to the top donor. It's going to be a crypto graffiti print, I think.
Exclusive, one of a kind, artistic print from like Bitcoin most prolific visual artist.
Yeah, and like a vinyl press record, right?
Yeah, from a track from Bitcoin Audio, Bitcoin's most prolific sound artist.
Yeah.
So some pretty sweet stuff in that pack.
You can check out all the information at where I said bitcoinmagazine.com/r. That's OUR, not ARE. OUR-hero-how. All the information's there. We hope that you can give to ALS Foundation. I mean, it's a really good cause, and do it for Hal. We wouldn't be here today if it weren't for Hal, helping Bitcoin in its early days.
If you haven't heard of Hal, I mean, which you probably have, but I would say my favorite of that 4 is Hal, because I really enjoy like looking through his forum posts, his tweets, and like just you can like almost feel like you're right there with him in some of his kind of early advocacy and work he was doing publicly with Bitcoin. And so he's my favorite of those pioneers to remember, because you can like dig into the internet and then just kind of like pretend you're right there next to him working on Bitcoin. It's pretty cool, and he's a notoriously super positive guy, which is sadly like not common enough in our world these days.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Well, so I mean, that's a great kind of intro to the show. If that was all that happened this week, it'd be a big week.
Yeah.
But holy cow, has it been a just unbelievably big week. And I think we have to kick off kind of our roundup of news with the BitMEX.
Bombshell.
Yeah, bombshell, for lack of a better word.
Big news. So BitMEX is like kind of, I mean, anecdotally speaking, people's preferred way when they're kind of like beyond the Coinbase level of like, I just want the easiest way to buy Bitcoin, but they want to do some more kind of sophisticated Bitcoin investment, and of course, a ton of other cryptocurrencies. And then BitMEX founder Arthur Hayes, a great friend of Bitcoin Magazine. So this was definitely a bombshell around our office yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, we were all taking in the news with everybody live on Twitter, basically, just watching, this series of events unfold. But, it's easy to shit on BitMEX, right? BitMEX was this casino type, 100x margin long if you want. Doesn't have to play by the rules because they're not touching fiat. Incorporated in Seychelles to have the most lax regulation, yada yada yada. But really, what BitMEX is it's Bitcoin to its core in a lot of ways. Yeah, they're a custodian, but the idea of being able to create a product that people want to use, and not have to worry about tiptoeing around regulations that are really only there to keep the people who are already in power, build a moat around them, build a million upon millions of dollars of regulatory costs in order to stay compliant moat. And they said, you know what, we're not going to touch dollars. We're going to just play with Bitcoin and only Bitcoin. And because of that, we're not going to have to worry about any of that. We're going to go regulatory arbitrage our way out to Seychelles and just do it. And they did it, and they built a great product, and people used it for, what, like 6 years, I think? I mean, it was like 2014 when they first launched. So, there's been, I think we had a tweet about this from Bitcoin Magazine, but of all of the different financial scams that have happened over the past few years, between the '08 financial crisis, the FinCEN documents that we were talking about
that last week.
Yeah, of them laundering trillions of dollars of money.
Who they arrested over those revelations?
No one.
Oh, that's
no
right.
one.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
this is the
right.
thing. People don't get in trouble in the financial industry for outright scamming people and taking their money and giving money to cartels.
Talk about things we're worried about with, like, okay, you need to require personal identifying information to avoid potential money laundering. I mean, the FinCEN files revealed direct money laundering violations for like literally the world's biggest criminals.
Yeah.
And nothing's gonna happen.
In Bank Secrecy Act compliant banks.
Right.
It's not like we're even pretending that the Bank Secrecy Act does anything.
I don't want to dwell on the FinCEN files for a second week in a row, but the irony is just so rampant. Like the FinCEN files were things that we were able to report on because these were banks raising red flags about, hey, I think we might be money laundering for bad actors here, and then just doing it anyway. It took years for the reports to come out. There were no consequences from them, and will be no consequences from these reports coming out, most likely. Like, ridiculous.
Yeah, and then you have BitMEX, who's just building a product for people to go margin long YOLO on Bitcoin.
Just play around with, like, wizard internet money.
Yeah, and here they are getting arrested. The CTO got arrested for BitMEX. I mean, come on. Like, we could talk about this for hours because it strikes you to your core about what it means to build a better future and like build cool experiments and things without having to worry about paying millions of dollars in startup costs in order to even get to play in the sandbox. Like, that's the whole point of Bitcoin. So, I don't want to just keep repeating ourselves and beating a dead horse, but to Arthur, to everyone at BitMEX, like we at Bitcoin Magazine, we got your back. Like, we feel you guys, we feel your pain. We hope that you guys will be able to fight this and that you will make Bitcoin all the more anti-fragile by getting out of all of this and proving to the world what a cool company you guys built and how much innovation there's going on in Bitcoin right now.
Yeah, hard to find the silver lining, but hopefully there's some out there that comes out. But the only other thing I'd shout out is I feel like BitMEX research is a little bit underrated. As far as like, things that are cool about BitMEX, they really put out some solid reports on Bitcoin activity, etc. Um, that we reference all the time at Bitcoin Magazine. And again, like a silver lining maybe is if I can bring some more attention to what BitMEX research does and give people opportunity to kind of dig down that rabbit hole, like just shout out to their team there too.
Yeah, some of the best research, also some of the most entertaining research. I mean,
Yeah.
they had good clips, like good.
Yeah, they really do a
Yeah.
great mix of like dry data with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek kind of analysis or introductions and stuff. It's true.
Yeah, that's a good plug. If you haven't checked them out, go check them out. But BitMEX, we love you. Let's fight this together, and we got your back. So that's one piece of news from this week,
Yeah,
but
right.
there's been so much more news. Another big thing that happened was, and this was kind of a viral thing that happened, Brian Armstrong kind of released this manifesto on Twitter and on Medium talking about how Coinbase is a mission-focused company and that they don't want to really divert their attention away from the mission. And, he said, like, we don't want to get political. And so, of course, what happened? It blew up. Everyone went crazy. They lost their minds.
Right. That in itself became like a political act. I guess the choice to have no opinion is an opinion. I mean, to me, this isn't directly Bitcoin news, although Coinbase and Bitcoin are just kind of intractably linked forever. But I think it is kind of like cryptocurrency companies out there do newsworthy things. They look at the way of conducting business probably differently than your traditional companies do, and in that sense, this is sort of like a Bitcoin-esque story. Like Brian is, and as far as I know, like one of the most significant people to put out kind of a statement like that. And then other news that hit was sort of like, so he wants to be apolitical, and he put out like a memo to his employees, like, hey, if you don't like that mission, here's like a pretty generous severance pay, like, get out of here.
Yeah. Oh my God. So this was like, I think this was just badass. Like, kudos to Brian. We may have our differences about Bitcoin and whether he says it or not, which he did say it.
Oh, good.
He did say it in his response to Jack Dorsey, who was like tweeting him about it. He was like, "Our mission is Bitcoin. Is Bitcoin's mission." So I was like, "Hey, there you go." He mentioned crypto, but he said Bitcoin. Anyway, a 6-month severance package for people who were there for a while. Just saying, like, listen, here's your golden parachute.
Yeah.
GTFO. All right.
We only want apolitical people in this company.
Like, holy cow! Like, that is the most baller status like way to treat any sort of dissent coming around this mission statement. It's like, you don't want to be with us? All right. Literally, we're gonna just grant you 6 months of your salary to just go away. And we don't want to hear what you have to say about how this needs to be some political thing. It's just like, get out of here.
Right. I mean, Bitcoin is apolitical, or Bitcoin is a political stance that's beyond the systems that we traditionally think about now, maybe. Or I mean, it's kind of like a Bitcoiny move to just be like, we do not care at all what. Yeah, and it's kind of a take that we have at Bitcoin Magazine. Like any kind of like minor regulatory development, we tend to not ignore, but like have a hard time believing it's a huge deal because we're really here for the mission where Bitcoin doesn't give a shit about your regulations one way or another.
Honey Badger.
Right.
Yeah, so,
So is this a Bitcoiny move by Brian Armstrong? It's I guess the question I'm trying to ask here.
Yeah, I think this is a hyper Bitcoin move. This is the ultimate Bitcoin move. We had a great conversation, by the way, here's the plug, on Drinks in Quarantine last night, and I'm going to paraphrase kind of what Dan Held said, but Dan Held gave the Silicon Valley kind of insider scoop on what was going on, in the companies around him. He's out in Silicon Valley, and he was saying that, what's interesting is first, Coinbase itself is really just a Silicon Valley company. It's not as much a Bitcoin company. And he drew that distinction because he said, people in Silicon Valley just jump from kind of the next big thing to the next big thing to the next big thing. So it's like Facebook to Uber to Coinbase and like that kind of row. So they didn't care about Bitcoin. They didn't care about, the mission of Coinbase. They were just taking a job to build the resume for the next big thing that they can jump on and take advantage of. And so in a lot of ways, this was a reaction to those people, and it was like a, this is actually what our core mission is. It's, to make Bitcoin everywhere, to increase hyper Bitcoinization, to bring banking to the unbanked, all these kind of things, and all the people who were there who were making a fuss about the political environment and these just small issues in comparison to trying to improve the world's financial system.
Right.
He was basically saying, just go. And so that was an interesting thing to hear. And then what Dan also said was interesting is there aren't a lot of Silicon Valley companies in the Bitcoin space that aren't like that. He was basically saying there's a lot of negatives, but basically he was saying that all of these Silicon Valley Bitcoin companies have the same issue that they're working through, where they've gotten scale, they've gotten kind of the Silicon Valley ethos built into their employees in the company, and they're all kind of having to muddle through these difficult issues of today, and having to take a stance on it. And I think this is just really interesting. It's like that environment is not conducive to what a Bitcoin company's mission is.
It might be the only way you can win at this point. I mean, the more you take a political stance one way or the other, just the more divisive, the more pervasive politics is going to become, and literally every decision. That's you just probably need to be you know what, this is literally a politics.
Yeah, I mean it is. It's like a productivity virus.
Right,
it's just once it enters, it'll just go after every ounce of unity and progress you can have in the company. So we're talking a lot about this one too, but I thought it was really cool. I thought it was well done by Brian and folks at Coinbase for doing this, and
unlikely hyper be moved by Brian.
Yeah,
that's how I sum it up.
Totally. So we'll move on to the next thing because there's still so much news to cover. Probably the next big news was that Salt Lending had to return, they got the message from the SEC, they had to return $47 million from their ICO back to the ICO investors. Now, we don't have to cover this that long, but...
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, so, I mean, post ICO boom, there's a bunch of these, and, my favorites were DJ Khaled ordered to pay, he's going to get fined for promoting some
Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, they kind of cleaned up all these erroneous ICOs. With Salt ordered to pay some money back, it's a signal to me hey, they're still combing through, just this huge wave of coin offerings that went down and deciding what to them are legit, which one, and who's violated what. So I do feel there's going to be more probably big ICO reversals to come based on this one.
Totally, yeah. I mean, I think I was reading through what they said, and there was a pretty red flag moment where Salt promised its investors returns. So that's
Oops.
Yeah, oopsie daisies. You definitely, that's a big no-no if you're wanting to offer an unregistered security. So I see this was kind of an easier one for them to target, it seems. But still very interesting that they're still doing this, like you said.
Even saying that, as cut and dry as the statement from regulators might seem, these things are so nuanced, and just knowing that Salt is, took it seriously, not just some DJ Khaled scam. What seems cut and I don't know that any of this stuff is cut and dry. I think you definitely use the term relatively, which is a fair term, and it probably is relatively cut and dry. But I bet if you dug into this one, it'd be what counts as a security? What counts as a promise of returns? What's really an ICO? There's just so much gray area, and it's really the whole ICO thing is still an instance of regulators not really able to keep regulation up with the rate of innovation in finance.
Well, totally. I mean, it all comes back to that good old Howey test that people have talked about so many times in the crypto space, and it's
if only it were that easy.
I know. Well, but it's the Howey test was made for stocks and
boomer stuff.
Yeah, you old people out there trying to make your little broken financial instruments. No, it wasn't made for what we can do today. It's just they're trying to retroactively apply it, and so it's gonna be messy. This is a pretty big. I mean, $47 million. That's a big thing to do, especially because I was checking Salt's market cap. It's at $5 million right now. So I don't know how that's all gonna play out, but It was very notable that it happened, and it was a lending platform that you can lend Bitcoin on, so somewhat Bitcoin tangentially related. And yeah, I mean, just very interesting to see how that evolves and what ends up happening there. Moving on to more news, KuCoin got hacked, guys.
Right, which when hacks hit the radar on a unfortunately pretty frequent basis, my first question with KuCoin was like, is this a Bitcoin hack or is this like a ERC20 hack? And it was a substantial amount of Bitcoin that was lost.
So the number that they put out was $150 million worth of crypto taken from off the exchange, which is, I mean, that's a lot. That's a heck of a lot. I even saw, I think Larry from the block was saying that looking at the wallets, his own untrained eye said maybe even more than 150, like 280 million, which would put it at like one of the largest hacks in the history of Bitcoin. What's interesting, I think, there's a couple interesting things in my opinion. First and foremost, they took a whole bunch of other cryptos besides Bitcoin, and like one by one, all of them have just frozen their chains and locked the funds. This great decentralized protocol is basically saying, yeah, you can't actually transact on here because we're not decentralized. We can totally control who's transacting. So basically that big hack happened and 150 mil was taken and all these other coins. I think 50% has already been frozen. Like Tether froze it. There's like a Velo something that froze it. I mean, all these. You want to read through the list of some of these cryptos? Velo.
Never heard of it.
Orion.
I think I've heard of that one.
Cardia Chain.
No, never heard of it.
Ocean Protocol.
Yes.
VIDT Datalink.
No.
Noya Network.
No.
Co-vesting.
No. Although I'll say with Noya Network, some of these seem like they're purposely made to. I've seen them, or they are structured so I feel like I have seen them because they're like vague or close enough to know.
Noya would be Nokia without the K.
Is that
what
what
you're thinking?
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically, it's all these little coins that are now like frozen their blockchains or whatever, and it's like, okay, so none of this is actually decentralized, and yeah, I mean, of course. The last interesting note I would say for this one is that KuCoin has said that they will cover the losses with their insurance fund.
Nice. Thanks,
so,
KuCoin.
Yeah, so I mean, like, that surprises me for a couple reasons. Mainly, they have 150 mil in an insurance fund somewhere that they can just toss at all these losses.
Who's their insurer? That's what I don't know.
Well, so I don't know if this is like their insurance fund that they've created based on trading like fees, or whether someone actually agreed to come in and insure a crypto exchange. But either way, wow. That's all I can say is wow.
My last note is that I think that I don't have a sense of how much Bitcoin was taken, other than it was a significant amount. But it didn't really rock the price at all, which is kind of good to see after a significant hack goes down.
I'm seeing 21, maybe 22 million in Bitcoin was stolen.
I mean, yeah. So like that's a more than a drop in the bucket, I feel.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting. You bring up a great point, actually. It didn't really tank on the news of KuCoin at all.
Right.
It did tank on the news of BitMEX.
Right.
And very more recently, it has just tanked on the news, which is our last story.
Wow.
Great transition. Trump got COVID, all right?
Huge Bitcoin news, people.
Guys, here's why it's Bitcoin news. Because Bitcoin tanked after this.
Yeah.
What?
As did stocks.
As in stocks, gold didn't tank, interestingly. So once again, Bitcoin is not correlated to stocks or gold, really. It's just like doing its own thing.
Yeah.
But I guess this time the market decided that Trump getting COVID is a bad thing. Although I think recently it's kind of recovered from that tank back to where it was post BitMEX news.
Let's pose the question to ourselves, and I'm hoping you can start. Is Trump getting COVID good or bad for Bitcoin, and why do you say that?
Like, I don't even know how to unpack that question, What I think is interesting is that, sometimes I like the idea of like Mr. Market. I think, is that a Warren Buffett thing where he's like, I wonder how Mr. Market's feeling today, kind of thing.
Sounds like it.
Sounds like total Warren move. Warren. Yeah. Anyway, this really felt like a total, I have no idea how this is going to affect Bitcoin. Let's just watch what happens and see.
Right.
Like we have an answer. But is it good for Bitcoin?
You have to ask yourself that about everything that happens in life.
I don't think it's bad for Bitcoin. I don't think it's good for Bitcoin. I think it's happened.
Has Trump been good or bad for Bitcoin or agnostic? And if it is agnostic, then I'll say Trump in some ways being extremely good or bad. You know, it's so hard to be agnostic from Trump that even that would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I would say as a whole, Trump has been fine for Bitcoin because he hasn't put forth any regulation to outlaw it. So from that perspective,
could be worse.
It could be worse.
Yeah.
But was he good for Bitcoin? I'm sure everyone has a take on that. I don't know what the right take is.
I'm gonna say good for Bitcoin because I think that he has fueled the economic stimulus, the fiat stimulus more than some other presidents might have, and the more that happens, the more I am anecdotally but confidently seeing people be like, something's wrong with this system.
Yeah.
And there's got to be some kind of alternative, and like when that happens, I think it's good for Bitcoin.
I'll give you that. He definitely has made everyone think our system is an absolute joke. So I'll give you that one.
Sure.
But so you have anything to add?
No, I mean that's
I think that basically does it. That was a lot of news to cover, guys. What a week. Holy cow. We skipped other news that we were just like, we can't really cover that in this short amount of time, so let's just call it a show here.
Yeah.
Guys, the weekend's here. You know, take a breath. Enjoy the sun. Fall has fallen. And you know, with all the noise of news, never forget that Bitcoin keeps churning. The world keeps turning. And
our mics keep changing.
Yeah, dude.
All right. Who knows what we'll have next week? You're gonna have to tune in
to
find out.
Make Bitcoin great again.